Guys, it's the Bluebloods, and we are coming back at you guys with another huge episode. We are joined today by a very special guest, and it's the voice of the Tennessee Volunteers, Mr. Bob Kesling. He's with us today. We're here to talk all things Tennessee Volunteers football, and we just want to thank you for joining us, Bob.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
For sure. So I feel like it's only right to start talking, talk about John Majors, who led Tennessee to multiple SEC championships and was beloved by just about everybody in Knoxville, Tennessee. Can you just start the show off by speaking on his influence as a whole and the impact he had on Knoxville and the program?
He not only had an impact in Knoxville, he had an impact across the entire state. And I think all in college football and even in pro football. Coach Majors had 33 assistant coaches that coached under him go on to become head coaches. And some big names like Jimmy Johnson and Jackie Sherrill and David Cutcliffe, Philip Fulmer, Lovie Smith, Ron Zook. I mean, there were a whole bunch of them. And so, and of course, all the All-American players he coached. So he just had a huge impact. He was obviously one of the biggest stars in college football as a player. He won the SEC Player of the Year twice, runner-up in the Heisman Trophy, All-American. And so he was a tremendous player. Played on the 1956 team that went undefeated during the regular season. So he was just a great player out of Huntland, Tennessee. And then, of course, went on to a coaching career, was an assistant for a while at Iowa State and then Pittsburgh, led them to a national championship. And he followed that by coming to Tennessee in 1977. So it took a while to get the Tennessee program back going. His first season as the head coach of Tennessee lost 7 games. And the first 5 years, they didn't have a winning season. So it took him a while to get going. But then early in the 80s, they beat Alabama, and then they beat Auburn and Bo Jackson in 85, went on to the Sugar Bowl that season. And that really seemed to get the program up and running, and then turned into one of the elite programs in college football. I think one of the legacies that Coach Majors had at Tennessee, he developed wide receiver U. And I think he really brought the passing game to the SEC. And one thing he brought was speed. He always coached speed. And so when he got sprinters like Willie Gault and Anthony Hancock, and Tennessee at that time really did a great job of bringing in track athletes, 2 sports stars. They could play football and track. And one of those was Anthony Hancock, Willie Gault also as well. But the speed element that Tennessee added to the SEC, I think, kind of changed the league because at that time, back in the early 80s, there were a lot of folks were running the football, like Herschel Walker and Bo Jackson. And so you were looking for those big, strong tailbacks. And Tennessee went with more of a passing attack, speed, and throwing the ball down the field. And so, Tony Robinson really was the first Tennessee quarterback that really changed the field. And then he got hurt in the middle of the 85 season. Jeff Francis came in later, and he set all kinds of records. And then it just kept evolving and going on and on. But I think Coach Majors should get a lot of credit for kind of changing the SEC in terms of how to approach things offensively.
Yeah, no doubt. And I just thought it would be appropriate to have you on the show and not address that to start. But I want to shift to last season. And to say it was a rough start early might be an understatement. But that team really seemed to find their stride late in the season. What do you think changed between the first 6 weeks where we saw some tough games toward the last few weeks of the season where we saw Tennessee go on this run and even end the season off with a huge bowl win in the Gator Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Tennessee did not play well early in the season, and it really was a rough start. And then you give Coach Pruitt a lot of credit for keeping that team on track because there was a chance it could have skidded off into the ditch very easily. But there were a lot of good leaders on that team that didn't allow that to happen. Now, Tennessee had a 6-game winning streak down the stretch. That's everybody's talking about. But there were several games in there that Tennessee could have lost. I mean, they needed a goal line stand at the end of the game against Kentucky. They needed a long drive against Mississippi State and, to keep the ball away from them in the fourth quarter. And then, of course, Tennessee had to rally against Indiana to win that bowl game, and it took a key onside kick late in the game that Tennessee recovered and took it down for the winning score. So it's not like they suddenly were dominating people in the second half of the season, but what they did is they found a way to win. And that's one thing that Coach Pruitt had kept preaching to his team. You got to find a way to win. And they finally started figuring that out. Now, going into this season, they got a lot of the veterans back on the team. They lost several good players off last year's team, but they've got a nucleus of a pretty good group coming back, especially in the offensive line. Trey Smith's returning has been a big boost. They've got some experience back in the defensive front. So when you win in the SEC, you win at the line of scrimmage, and Tennessee's, I think, addressed those problems, and that should be one way to really build this program going forward. And you got a veteran quarterback, Jared Garantano, that's been around for a long time, so they will have experience at that position as well, and they've got some good young guys pushing him. So that's a good situation to have if you're a head coach, that you've got a veteran coming back, but as Coach Pruitt showed last year, he's willing to pull them if they don't play the way they're supposed to, which he did last year with Garantano, and then Jared got the job back. But I think Coach Pruitt talks about competition every single day and doesn't want people to get comfortable. So you've got to be the best player that we can practice to play. And that's one thing he's done. He's finally developed plenty of depth, and that will play to Tennessee's favor this year as well.
And I kind of want to stick to this quarterback battle because I kind of wanted to ask you, I mean, like you said, we saw last year Jarrett Guarantano coming in and then eventually losing the job to Brian Moore, and he played really well down the stretch against some really good teams. I mean, that first half of the Georgia game was really good for Tennessee. I mean, what are your impressions of each quarterback, and do you think Jarrett keeps the job going into next season throughout the season, or do you see a younger quarterback kind of pushing it and toward the end of the season they make a change again?
Well, that's kind of up to Garantano, how he plays, how he takes care of the football, his decision making. It's his second year under offensive coordinator Jim Chaney. As you remember, they've had a lot of different changes as the coordinator spot the last several seasons, but now Chaney's in here for his second year, and I think that'll make Garantano a much more consistent quarterback. And Maurer came in and had his moments. JT Shroud played some. Harrison Bailey is a highly touted freshman coming in. So there's going to be plenty of competition at the quarterback position, and I think that's healthy for most football teams. So, but it would be hard for me to believe that Garantano wouldn't be the starter when the season began. And then, as I said just earlier, it's up to him to keep the job.
Right. And to shift back to Jeremy Pruitt, he came in 2 years ago from Alabama. What were your first impressions of Pruitt, and what makes him a good fit in Knoxville?
Well, your first impression of him was that he was a football coach. Your dad was a football coach. He grew up in a football family, coached under Nick Saban at Alabama, so he learned a lot about what a good football team looks like. He's been around at Georgia and Florida State, some of these other places. So he's seen good programs, and he's seen what it takes, what a good football team looks like. And when he got to Tennessee, he knew that didn't look like a championship football team. And so he went to work recruiting. They didn't lose a lot of players transferring, dropping off when Coach Pruitt came in. I think that was a good sign. He went right to work convincing the players that things are going to be different and they're going to win and all those type things, which is now starting to play out. But the one thing, every time you have a conversation with him, it's always usually about football, never strays very far from that. And during that conversation, it usually crops up something about recruiting, because he does that every single day. And I think that you see the prowess that he's had in recruiting is paying off, on paper at least, according to all the reports. Tennessee's having a bang-up year in recruiting. Now you got to finalize that and get all those guys signed, but the commitments right now is a pretty impressive list. And Tennessee, with a staff like Coach Pruitt has, their first priority is recruiting, and he makes no bones about it. If you're going to be on the staff, you got to be a good football coach, but you got to probably be an equally good recruiter. So, because he knows, he's been around great teams, that you don't very often out-coach guys in college football anymore. They're too good. You better just get better players and just out-scheme them, and that's what he's trying to do. And I think as you see last year, it kind of pays off. The other thing that has impressed me, he's not afraid to take a risk. I mean, he tells you all the time they're out to win the game. So fake punts and onside kicks and all those type things are very much alive, and you better be alert when Coach Pruitt's out there, because they're bound to do anything that will help them win a game, and they take a lot of risks.
Yeah, and I mean, you kind of took the direction of this interview exactly how I planned on it. I mean, right now, Tennessee, we've covered on the podcast recently about how Tennessee has the number 2 class in the country, which probably surprises a lot of average fans. But what are your first impressions of the class? Who are you most excited to see? And I think you already highlighted this, but do you think that it's just Coach Pruitt being the biggest factor in landing these elite players that we haven't seen in probably the last 3-4 years Tennessee land?
Yeah. Well, I can't get into specifics about names because they're not signed yet. They're not Tennessee commitments. So, a lot of things can happen between now and signing day. So just because they're commitments on paper, but I think, as I mentioned before, I mean, Coach Pruitt, if you talk to him about, okay, what are you looking for in the offensive line? He said, we want them to be this tall, we want their arms this long, we want, trunks on them and good base. Well, what are you looking at the tailback? Well, when I got this big and this fast. What are you looking for at receiver? I mean, each position, they have a specific type that they're looking for. And, then you vary and you close out your class by maybe getting a special athlete here or somebody that you think might be dynamic. But for their basic needs, they have a blueprint that they go down, and they figure out what this specific player looks like. And that's kind of how they're doing it. And so far it's paid, big dividends for how Tennessee has kind of built this roster. And, it looks much more like an SEC football team than it did when he arrived here.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I want to shift into looking more into next season. So for me, a player that stuck out, especially toward the end of last year, was running back Erik Gray. He had like over 250 yards rushing in the Vanderbilt game, 3 touchdowns, had a very good bowl game as well. Do you think Gray will take the next big step next season and be that go-to running back that Tennessee can use? And what do you think about his development throughout last season?
You could tell he was pretty special when he first started playing. He has something that you can't teach, and that is the ability to make the first guy miss you. And so he can get in the hole and kind of make a little juke and get around that first linebacker and then get into the secondary. That's something you can't really coach. You just either got that or you don't. First, when the season started, he maybe was a little too cute trying to make spin moves and, doing stuff that was really effective in high school, but maybe it was just kind of a waste of energy when you get to this level, because you're not going to juke many guys out of the way. You got to run around them or, make a move on them and get around them. Once he figured that out and started just, running and using his natural ability, he just kept getting better and better and better. I think he has great vision. He has that cutback ability that, again, that's something else you can't teach. Running back either feels that cutback or he doesn't, and you can't teach that. And so there's a lot of things about Erik Gray to like. I think he's a really smart young man and very intelligent, and really does a great job of studying the game plans. So I think they're really excited about the future for Erik Gray.
He popped off the screen to me watching the Vanderbilt game and even the bowl game in the Gator Bowl. But looking at the Vols' schedule, two of their 3 biggest conference games, of course, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, are played in Neyland Stadium. How big of an advantage is that? And do you think Tennessee breaks through and can take a few of these games against some of the more elite teams that most experts are saying are going to compete for that SEC title?
Well, that's the goal. And I think that from a talent standpoint, I think Tennessee is getting closer to being a level playing field with those teams. I think that, Tennessee has played these teams pretty close the last couple of years, but they just haven't been able to break through because maybe the talent level hasn't been on an equal par with those other teams. But I don't think they're backing off the challenge of going after those guys this year. I think that It'll be one of those games where they've got a shot to win it, and that's the goal, to break through, and they'll get early tests, with Florida and then Georgia and Alabama. So it's the same little thing for Tennessee every year. When you look at the schedule, by about mid-October, you got a pretty good idea on what kind of team you've got, because you played such a challenging schedule. So, but that's what makes this league fun, and that's what makes Tennessee's schedule so challenging. They'll learn a lot in the Oklahoma game, and they'll learn a lot about their team and where they are. So there'll be plenty of tests, but I think this is a Tennessee team that's built to be able to play a lot of the better teams, not only in this league but in this country, toe to toe. Now it's, as we mentioned earlier, it's about learning how to win those big games. They learned how to win, some close games last year. Now you got to learn how to win the big games, and that is a big jump.
Yeah, and you even said the Oklahoma game's second week of the season. So who's one player our listeners or myself may not be aware of yet that's either didn't play a lot last year or might have been hurt or something like that, that you foresee making a huge impact this upcoming season and could be an unseen X factor?
Well, I really hate doing that, because, a lot of times you talk about a young man and then suddenly he doesn't come through for you. I would say that the two of the players, though, that Tennessee really needs for them to take that next big step were the two tackles from last year, the two freshman offensive tackles. And they played really well, but last year at times, but they kind of went through it's a grind if you're a freshman, and learning how to take care of your body and going through that long stretch of the season. By November you get pretty beat up. But if those two freshman offensive tackles from last year, Wright and Morris, if they come in this year and really take that huge next big step to really being dominant offensive tackles in this league, and then you go with Brandon Kennedy back at center, and then you got Trey Smith at one of those guard spots, that's going to be a pretty formidable offensive line. So I think the two players that they really need are those tackles to step up and be big-time players.
Yeah, and I mean, so for the last question about next season before we move on, it's early, it's only June, but what are your early expectations, your early just feel about this 2021 team? I mean, what do you think ceiling could be? What do you think, if everything goes wrong, could the floor be? Just what are your overall impressions so far about what to expect this upcoming season?
Well, I mean, I think they're going to be better. I think they're going to be a team that's going to should be in every single football game. I don't think there's a game they're going to go in as a double-digit underdog. I think that they got a chance to win every one of them. And so, in this league, a lot of times it boils down to, as we said, offensive and defensive line. And I think Tennessee's as good there as anybody in this league. And then the next thing you go to is quarterback play. And if Tennessee can get just consistent, good quarterback play, then I think Tennessee is going to be really a dangerous team to deal with. If they get inconsistent quarterback play like they had last year, then it's going to be tough at times for Tennessee to win. But that's not the plan. I think they think that their quarterback is going to play well. And if that's the case, this Tennessee team is going to be tough to handle, I think, at times.
Yeah, and so now I want to move more toward your time as the voice of the Tennessee Volunteers. You've been the lead play-by-play announcer for some time now. So just looking back, reflecting, what is your favorite game that you have ever called in your career so far?
Well, we've been blessed to have a lot of big games. There's a 6 overtime game against Arkansas, 5 overtime game against Alabama. Those were huge. Tennessee won down in the Orange Bowl against Miami. The games at Notre Dame have been special. So there've been a lot of great games. Have there been that one game that stands out above all the others? Well, those come with championships and national championships, and haven't been fortunate to be involved in one of those games yet. I hope one of those might be coming. But they had a lot of big memories. The 6 overtime against Arkansas, I just remember Casey Clausen hitting Jason Witten right down the middle in the sixth overtime to win the game. And Casey and Jason Witten remain two of my favorite all-time Tennessee players. And to see them hook up on that big play was something I'll always remember. So that was really special. But anytime you have the honor to call games at Neyland Stadium, it's really special. I mean, it's kind of pinch myself all the time that I'm this fortunate to be in this position, but it is it's just thrilling. I mean, when the team, you never get tired of them running through the tee. You never get tired of the 100,000 fans and the excitement around the stadium on game day. So, and if I ever do, then it's time to quit. But it is special, and it's just there's a passion for football in this state year round. I mean, it's 365 days a year. I mean, I don't know there are many sports talk shows around the state that when they started up, it's not a question about the quarterback or a lot of the questions you've asked tonight, Zach. I mean, they just they eat and breathe Tennessee football in this state, and that's what's fun. Lindsey Nelson once told me, he said, take a job for passion, and not necessarily your passion, but the passion of the people that are following your team. Because if nobody cares, it's not a lot of fun to do the games. And I think he was exactly right about that. And that there are a lot of people that care about how this Tennessee team does, and they're so passionate about it. And that's what makes a game day at Neyland Stadium so special.
Right. And I mean, you talk about the passion. I graduated from Auburn, so I've been to a lot of SEC stadiums, and now go to Kansas State. And I just feel like there's very few schools that can match an SEC school's passion. It's just a different environment. So I want to ask, throughout your career, you've been all across the country calling games. What away environment or any environment outside of Knoxville has been your favorite to call games and just experience their game day?
Notre Dame, and it's not really close, I don't think. It's just a special place. You get to go up there on Friday and you walk around campus and you see their marching band marching up their quadrangle, and then you go over to the Golden Dome and then you go down to the Grotto, and it means a lot to them. And I know that what's something that strikes you about Notre Dame is they don't have to take a backseat to anybody in terms of tradition. The people are so friendly. They're the ushers at the stadium. It's always welcome to Notre Dame. We're glad you're here. And even if you win or lose in the game, then as you leave, so we're glad you came. I hope you enjoyed your time here at Notre Dame. Hope to see you soon. I mean, they are the most polite ushers and people in the stadium, and they just understand that Notre Dame football is special, and they've had all those Heisman Trophy winners and national championships and all those type things. And it's if you're a college football fan, you need to put on your bucket list going to Notre Dame, because it, to me, is one of the special places to watch a college football game.
I hope to make it. I haven't been there, and I also sadly have not been to Knoxville, Tennessee yet. It's on my list. I'm going to go soon. It's one of the few SEC places I have not been. But when people rank the top tailgating game day environments in the SEC, Knoxville, Tennessee is always extremely high on the list. And I've seen some lists even have it one above some places that might have more notoriety. What makes the environment in Knoxville, and specifically Neyland Stadium, that makes it such a unique, memorable experience for fans?
Well, the size of it, for one, obviously over 100,000. The shape of the stadium, which was designed by General Neyland. I mean, he was an engineer, and he basically drew up the blueprints for the expansions. I mean, he had it down to the point that you need to do this, and then add this and this, and that's kind of the way they did it. And so the sheer size, just and the way how it's steep, and so the sound just goes right straight down on the field, and that makes it really deafening for visiting teams when they come in there. What's also unique, it's one of the few stadiums, there's a river that runs right outside the stadium, and a lot of people, the Vol Navy, they bring their boats up there and then tie them up, and then they party all weekend, and that's a special scene. There's lots of area around the stadium that you can tailgate, and people come early. I mean, they just make a day of it. You have people that are from all over the state, and so it's not like they just bop in and go to the game and leave and go home. I mean, a lot of them come in from Memphis and Jackson and all places around. So when they come in for the weekend, they come in for the weekend, and they're going to tailgate and hang out, enjoy their friends. And there's a special, the pregame is special with the band marches through campus to the stadium, and people follow the band coming in, and then we do our pregame show outside, and we have, a lot of, people that will sit there and watch the pregame. They just soak up, Tennessee football, can't get enough of it. So that's what makes it special.
Right. And so last question here. We started with a Tennessee legend. I want to end with one. Recently, the viral video went around of Peyton Manning dropping in on a Zoom class for the University of Tennessee. How much does he mean? I mean, we know he's a college football legend, but how much does he mean to the community of Knoxville and just the university as a whole? And do you honestly see him coming back to be involved deeper in the football program, maybe as a coach or something like that, maybe someday in the future?
No, I don't. I would never think that Peyton would want to be a coach. I've never heard him express that thought that he wanted to be a coach, but he is very involved in the program. He comes back, he gives the Peyton Manning scholarships to students. So he'll come back in the fall and he'll present those to freshmen. And the locker room at the stadium is named after him. They have Peyton Manning Pass. The team walks down that little strip of land going to the stadium. So Peyton's fingerprints his picture on the front of the stadium. So his fingerprints are everywhere, and he's really involved. I mean, he checks in. He comes to visit with the coaches. He'll swing in for practices every once in a while, and comes to games. He's just built a brand new hotel on the strip just off campus, and so I'm sure he'll be coming in. He's going to have his own little lounge and restaurant in there. So sure, now he's got a good place to hang out on games and a place to stay. So no, Peyton is really a tremendous ambassador toward the University of Tennessee. I remember when Tennessee played basketball at Kansas this year. Peyton showed up, flew in the day of the game, and just said he'd never seen Kansas. And when Tennessee was there, said no better reason. So he shows up in his orange shirt and his Tennessee hat, and is the biggest Vol fan in Allen Fieldhouse. So he's remarkable in terms of his board of Tennessee. He loves this place. He loves SEC football, and it shows. And it's amazing. I remember when I was doing the games for Jefferson Pilot, we went down to Archie Manning's house, the Manning's house there in New Orleans, and I was talking to Archie, who was just a great guy, about his two sons playing quarterback and those stuff. I think Eli at that time was a senior at Newman High School. And he said, it's amazing you have two sons that are quarterbacks like this. And Peyton can tell you every head coach in the SEC. He knows all their mascots, most of their fight songs. He can tell you their best players, they're All-Americans. And Eli can't even name the teams in the SEC. That's how different they are. But, Peyton has always been like that. He's just been consumed and obsessed with football and SEC football and Tennessee football. So it's great to have a guy like that as your ambassador and tooting your horn all over the country, because I don't think anybody ever questions his loyalty and his love for the University of Tennessee.
I know I definitely don't. It's amazing to see. I thought it was an awesome video, especially at the time it happened with everything going on with COVID and everything. But that is a wrap for our interview. I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking Tennessee football with us. And I definitely hope to have you on during the season, especially, some of the bigger Tennessee games. Because I agree with you. I think Tennessee is going to be probably one of the most improved teams in the country.
Well, that's the goal. That's the hope. Let's just hope everything kind of gets back to a normal so we can have a football season, which I think we will. Right. I don't know what kind of form it's going to shape, but I think everybody here is chomping at the bit. The players just came back to campus today, so everybody's chomping at the bit to start working out again and get this football season rolling, because obviously it's very important, I think, to the people in this part of the country and all over the country to get football back. So, hey, I appreciate the call and appreciate the time, and anytime you need me, just give me a ring, Zach.
Awesome. Thank you. But guys, that is a wrap on our show today. I'm not going to drop our social media or anything. You guys already know all that. We'll be back soon with another episode. But for right now, guys, we're out.